Yeah. All right, so today we are talking about Sam Harris's book Line. Just a bit of context about it. Sam Harris is a writer, philosopher guy. I think it's interesting perspective coming from him. I mean, I think how he got famous or how I learned about him is being like an atheist who like is just like kind of this atheist thinker who's always like arguing with people about religion, about the Christian religion and then Islam. So it's interesting to have a book kind of talking about the problems with lying and why nobody should lie, from someone like that. And he breaks it down in a very like a logical way that made me really think and really resonated with me. And so that's why we wanted to talk about it. Just a little bit of context is that I read this book a few years ago, and this totally changed my perspective. And since then, I've tried to follow what this book says is its kind of main goal. And so then Caden just read it over the past month or so. And so that's what we're discussing today. Um, I mean, one interesting thing is that I grew up in a religious way, and so I've been told not to lie for a long time throughout my whole childhood, and the reasoning why was more of a religious reason than a logical reason, and so that's what was so profound about this book to me. So yeah, any kind of starting thoughts before we dive in?
Yeah, absolutely. Similar to you, yeah, I grew up in a religious household, and it was, yeah, you don't lie because it's a sin, and God will look down on you, right? Whereas this book breaks it down as, well, you don't lie because it is a detriment to your loved ones, and it's bad for you overall, and the long term. So, yeah, it was a different perspective than I'd heard a lot. And growing up in a religious household, I lied nonstop all the time with my parents. So if it was going out and drinking, I'd lie about that. And there's a quote specifically in the book that I think is super applicable to me, especially in childhood. It was, let's see, where was it? Unless one commits to telling the truth in instances, one finds that edges creep inward and exceptions to the principle of honesty begin to multiply. Um, and for me, when I probably first started lying to my parents just like nonstop. It was probably something pretty big that they'd get really upset about. Maybe got like really drunk with some friends when I'm 15 years old, and I'd lie about that. But that did kind of just set into motion this habit where I would lie even about the smallest things. It could be something I wouldn't get in trouble for, but it would be out of pure convenience, right? Maybe I'm hanging out with someone they hadn't met before, but I just tell them it's someone they had so they don't ask questions and I can go to my room quicker. This habit just started turning into an everyday activity, and it definitely corroded my relationship with them, certainly. So, yeah, I really enjoyed the book. I liked it talked a little bit more about like just when you are lying, you're also depreciating the people that you're lying to.
Okay, let's
And
let's hold off on that.
yeah, yeah,
Let's
sorry,
organize
sorry.
it in a certain way.
Okay.
So I haven't read this in many years, but how I remember it is that there's kind of like three main problems with lying. One, that it deteriorates the relationship to yourself, one that deteriorates the relationship to the person you're lying to, and then the third is that you deteriorate like the relationship with overall society. So correct me if I'm wrong, but then I think if that is right, then we should talk about it in that way, kind of in that
Yeah,
organized way.
love it. Sorry, kind of getting rambly, but yeah, that sounds good.
Cool. So
So,
I guess yeah, I guess kind of the first thing is that when you lie, you are deteriorating kind of your own I don't know, I mean, I guess how would you articulate? You're kind of destroying the foundation that you think about life through and kind of create this murky way that you're navigating through life, and so you're not able to see things exactly clear. I mean, is that right?
yeah, 100%. And even if it's a lie that is to yourself, right? I mean, those can be some of the most dangerous lies. It could be not even a lie you articulate to anyone else. Um, but yeah, you're creating these murky waters, and you're not able to look at a situation clearly. And um, it can get really dangerous. I've definitely lied to myself many times in terms of like drug usage, thinking like, well, since I'm not doing it this frequently, it's really not that much of a problem. And it was at the end of the day lying to myself, right? So that's um, just adding so many problems to my life, and it's disrespecting myself, and um, I think just making it a lot harder to function overall. Um, and it's hard, right? I mean, it's hard to tell the truth and be honest with yourself all the time. That's the whole reason that like this persists. When lying to yourself, it's comfortable in the moment, and it makes you feel a little bit better about yourself in the moment, and makes you not have to think for 20 or 30 minutes about some really uncomfortable truths. And that's definitely why I've done it and lied to myself a lot of the time. Um, but I think the point of this book is like if you spend the time with those uncomfortable truths, not just lies you tell yourself, but you tell the truth, all the time to other people, you'll find that the uncomfortable truth in the moment is multitudes less painful than the stress and the pain and the compounding just ickiness that you get from continuing this lie, both to self and to other people.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I mean, it seems like there's a consequence. When you do something wrong, there's going to be a consequence, and it's either now or it's later. And to your point, it seems sometimes that it's better just kind of kick the can down the road, and then maybe it won't kind of percolate up and bother you. And even kind of ignoring then the later aspects of it hurting the relationships and then overall society, even just yourself, it's going to end up more painful in the long run once eventually the lie gets caught back up to you. Um, and then also this part, how it kind of deteriorates the relationship with yourself and prevents you from being like the best person you can be, makes me think back to Atomic Habits by James Clear, which we have already talked about, where one of the things was that it really requires um, like a constant appraisal of what you've done, and try to think about those actions and how you can improve those. And actually, that now that I'm saying that, that also makes me think about
Meditation.
Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, which says the
Yeah,
exact same thing. That
absolutely.
I mean, that's the whole point of meditating on kind of your goals and what and the actions you've done, and see if those two things align. And if you're lying, saying, "Oh, I did really put in a lot of effort today," you're not like fully appraising if the actions and the goals align, and those can just get further and further and further away until they're way different. They're 180%, 180 degrees different. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Anything
So
else? Oh, I guess another point about the how it hurts you as an individual, and this made a ton of sense to me, is that just the mental stress and effort that it takes to keep a lie and keep it going and going and going is completely waste of mental energy. There's this idea of decision fatigue. It kind of was popularized by some of those like tech people, like the Facebook guy. I'm blanking on his name right now.
like,
Zuckerberg, yeah, but he wears the exact same clothes every day because kind of the thought process is you have mental effort to make X a finite amount of decisions, 100 good decisions per day. Do you really want to waste one of those decisions on what you're going to wear? You might as well just wear the same thing, and then you have 100 decisions to put on your business instead of 99. And I feel like the same thing goes with lying. That when you're lying, you're spending all this mental energy and all this mental effort on something that is inevitably going to burn you in the end. So you can either like sack up and take the consequence now, or you can waste all this mental effort, take away from your potential, and then still going to have a consequence later. And likely that consequence will be worse. So
absolutely,
that made a ton of sense to me, that even ignoring all the other things that are talked about in this book, it's just better not to lie, because then you just have a rule that you live by all the time. Like every single day I go and exercise. There's no thinking about it. That's just what I do. Every single day, I'm just going to tell a lie. Then I don't have to think about it and then think about the pros and cons of telling this person a lie and then try to remember what I told them last time, and this never ending web of stuff.
yeah. That's a great point. I mean, a real life example of that is like remembering what I told them last time and the amount of mental energy. I remember I had like this notebook, just all this different stuff I had to keep track of that I told my parents that was a lie. And I mean, the amount of mental energy to like have to go back on this and be like, okay, I told my dad this for this reason, but it was a little bit different when I told my mom that for this reason. So like if they ask about it, I then have to like think of something that would make both of those somewhat correct that is also similar to the truth. So I mean it just gets so chaotic, right? And it's like, why am I spending a fucking hour, doing this? Um it's yeah, it was crazy. It just takes up so much mental capacity, right? So I'm not able to spend like much time doing things that like actually matter in life, right? Which is like caring about school or like building better relationships, at school. So yeah, definitely great point.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you literally had a notebook.
Hmm. Yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
that'd be kind of interesting to track down and look at. That'd be
yeah. I
humorous,
mean,
but also retrospective.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's at my mom's house, or I'm sure she threw it away or didn't. I'm hoping she didn't open it. She's like, "Whoa, the fuck." There never was a guy named Mike. But yeah, it's super stressful for sure. And it, I think the basis, or like when I first started doing it, it was like maybe a bit of this survival type mentality where like, if my mom did find out something, like even if it was like a grade that wasn't very good. I remember I lied about grades too. Um the punishment could be really brutal. So it almost felt like a easy solution just to say, yes, I did get this grade, and find a way to kick the can down the road because I didn't want to deal with some of these pretty intense repercussions. But what ends up happening is that translates then into my adult life. And I'm doing that with friends and family that are not going to respond in this really intense, psychotic way. But I still have carried those habits on with me. Um, so that was the thing I really liked when reading it. It was just picking up like maybe at a time this was something that Caden needed to incorporate in his life for some type of survival to avoid this amount of pain. But you've now carried it way past that point, and you're now incorporating it into your life when it's um, really bad for you. It's really bad for the people around you. So,
Yeah, I mean that kind of makes me think of the habit that if you do something, it can just become a habit, and something like this would be a very bad habit to have.
mhm.
This isn't in this. I mean, another book that we're reading is Dopamine Nation, and there's an interesting anecdote, and so I'll just bring it in here because I think it applies specifically to kind of the thesis of this book. But there was I think he was a physician, but it doesn't matter. Some person who his family had a history of alcohol abuse, and he was drinking and was coming home from a party and was felt like he could drive, but anyway, was drinking and driving and got pulled over by the cops, and then ended up going to court. And the lawyer was telling him to plead not guilty, and they were going to do this lawyer magic to get out of it. And at that moment, he decided, you know what, like if I lie at this moment, like there's a good chance that I will like just keep lying. It'll become a habit, and I'll do that into my 40s and 50s, and I will end up like my parents. And so he decided at that moment to tell the truth, to plead guilty, and to like sack up and take all the consequences. And like as a young physician, I mean, that is really impressive to me because I
It
can't
is.
imagine the amount of problems that cause. And it talks about it in the book. Um, but to
That's
the point that you
especially impressive because, I mean, at that point, he could maybe convince himself for pleading not guilty in terms of legal repercussions, it might be done, right? So, like, it's not like kicking the can down the road. It's like just getting rid of it completely. But he still made that decision. That's, yeah, that's really impressive.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting example of that, how lying, you don't want to keep doing it because eventually it just becomes easier and easier to do. I think kind of the last point that I got from how it impacts your own relationship to yourself is just kind of maybe subconsciously how you feel about yourself or how confident you are about yourself. I can't remember if this was in the book or this is some other anecdote that I read, but there was like this woman who like started lying to her parents like in high school about grades because there was all this pressure for her to perform well in school, and didn't even graduate high school, but lied to her parents that she graduated high school and then she got into college. Anyway, kept lying and lying. She had told her parents she was a pharmacist, like had gone to pharmacy school and graduated. Point being, she had never even graduated high school. And then it was super sad, but then she committed suicide. She was 30 or something, because she just felt so much pressure and just felt so sad. And I guess I can't put words exactly to what she was feeling, but when you do lie, I think even if you're not consciously thinking about it, I mean, I think it subconsciously kind of digs away at your spirit or your confidence in
Absolutely.
who you are.
Absolutely. Because not, I mean, it just is the compounding effect, right? Compounding interest. It's just so powerful because, to not have graduated high school is probably something she's embarrassed about, and would feel bad telling her parents. But that omission compared to the end point, which was what probably a decade of lying, if not more so. That at that point probably just seems overwhelming and impossible to overcome. So that's yeah, definitely that's a really sad story. I can definitely relate in terms of college. I lied to my parents for an entire semester about my grades, and they did end up, finding out at the end of it. But yeah, I mean, I would be like, yeah, past this test got a 92. This certain question was difficult when I did not even show up to the test. And I definitely remember thinking as time went on, as finals were getting pretty close and the grades were going to be released, and there was really no way to hide it at that point. Just the overwhelming amount of stress. It seemed like at the start of the semester, it felt so easy and so convenient to tell them one test that I didn't go to, I did well on. And it now has gotten to this point uh, where there's 15 full credits that I'm not going to get, and they think I am. So, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and you could have still recovered and done really well that semester if you would have, told the truth at the very start that I am not prepared and I failed that
Yep,
first one. That maybe you could have got a tutor and then
exactly.
completely change the course. So it limits all the
Self.
negative things we talked about, but then it also just limits your potential. Like you are
Yeah.
not you're not finding the problems and fixing them, which is how you become successful. Is you fail and you learn from that failure. But
Yep.
if you're lying about it, then you're never really catching up. You're never getting the benefit of the failure. You're just getting all the negatives of the failure.
Exactly. Exactly. It's well said.
Anything else from kind of that section, that part of it with
No,
how it's negative
no,
to
I don't think so. That's a good synopsis.
so then kind of the next thing is it deteriorates the relationship with the other people that you're lying to or the people that are kind of in oh, individuals it deteriorates your relationship with. I mean, this one seems pretty obvious. If you lie to somebody, it completely deteriorates the relationship, in that moment, but for many years after.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, it is something I've experienced so often in my life where just the compounding lies with parents, with friends, family, that it's so unbelievably hard to recover that type of trust, right? Understandably so. If you're willing to lie for months on end or years on end about something that's pretty, serious, then where is the foundation of friendship, right? So, it is pretty self-explanatory. I think everyone can understand the concept of if you lie to someone, the relationship will be affected. But I really liked in this book it what I would convince myself a lot of the time is like it's like, well, this is a lie out of shame, and I'm not really depreciating this person when I'm lying to them. I'm just doing it because I'm shameful, which was a self lie, to be completely honest. I mean, this book kind of calls that out, and it's like, no, if you're, lying to this individual, it might be there's some baseline of shame, but you also are depreciating them as a human. You're not respecting them enough to come out and tell them the truth. And I like that point because I had told myself that's not what I thought, because it was easy just to say, I'm lying because I feel bad, not I'm lying because maybe a little piece of me doesn't respect this person the way I should. Um, but the book has a good point. It's like, no, you are absolutely depreciating that person. And if you truly love and respect them the way you say you do, even if it's this overwhelming amount of shame, you have an obligation to tell the truth. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love how this book puts everything in absolutes. It's saying, like, it doesn't matter if it's a malicious lie, it doesn't matter if it's a shameful lie, it doesn't matter if it's a white lie. They are all lying and they are all negative in the exact same way. And first,
Yeah.
I just like living my life by frameworks and just kind of having really simple rules that I have to stick to. And that was just so profound to me. That
Mhm.
that all those carry negatives.
Yeah.
Um, a few other thoughts about the other people. One thing he brings up is, say your friend is talking about lying to another one of your friends. So you're not necessarily the one that was lied to. He says, even if you're not consciously, if that doesn't consciously bother you, it will subconsciously deteriorate your relationship because you say, okay, if Bob lied to Steve, like is Bob also lying to me? And
Exactly.
I guess I never really kind of thought that through. And I know, yeah, I've had plenty of experiences, I guess, like that where people were kind of laughing offline to another person that wasn't in the room. And I think I probably did subconsciously judge that person or start to distrust that person a bit more. So
Mhm.
that was impactful to me.
Absolutely. Um, Same here. I've been in friend groups where that was pretty common, and you're like, okay, if this person is, willing to say this about this individual, and it could be trash talking them, but more egregious is if they're lying about a particular thing. It's like, okay, you I mean, I consciously would then look at that person and then be like, this is, a pattern, right? Um, and then not only that, you kind of consciously or subconsciously build this impression of them, but then you also find that it kind of makes it more acceptable for you to do the same thing. And so maybe I start a trend or a habit like that, and someone picks up on that, and then they do that, and it kind of is just this snowball effect that builds off of this deception, right? Where I start it and I lie in front of a friend and they notice it and they kind of see this as okay, this is maybe a little bit more socially acceptable here. And so then they do it. And then I see it and I'm like, okay, then yeah, it's okay to do more and more and more until it becomes a norm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also kind of gets into the next part where it deteriorates society and kind of builds on itself. I guess the last point I have about individual is that the only time I've so in when you're like a brand new doctor, you're an intern and you're doing these different rotations. The only time I've ever seen and you have to pass or fail these different rotations. I've seen three interns fail rotations, and all three times it's because they lie about something maybe not that impactful. And at the very start, we tell everyone like it doesn't matter if you screw up, it doesn't matter if you forget to look at this one value. The number one rule is never, ever, ever lie. Because
Yeah.
absolutely every single intern is going to forget
Make a
something. They're going to
mistake.
forget to look at the potassium. They're going to forget to look at the I's and O's. And so every single morning when you're rounding, the attending's always kind of peppering you with questions like, what's this? What's that? What's that? And kind of the point is to keep asking you questions until you can't answer it to kind of test how far or how advanced you are. Um,
Interesting.
but at some point you're going to get to something where it seems innocuous. Maybe you've been checking their potassium the last 5 days. It's always been normal. The second you say that it's normal and it hasn't been checked, it seems like that's always when it isn't normal. And somehow then
Yeah.
the attending finds out and that person gets burned. I've been I ended up reading this book right before I did my intern year, and this
Interesting.
book. I thought right back to that book many times, and I got chewed out plenty of times because I didn't do one thing. In retrospect, I was very thankful that I had read this book because if I hadn't read this book, I probably would have lied and would have got caught
Absolutely.
in it, and then maybe would have hurt a patient. So I think yeah, just another example on why a personal example, I guess, on lying and not lying. And then kind of the last part is oh, 1 second here. Oh, no worries, no worries. I will stop it here. Oh, we lost Caden. We're gonna pause and then come right back. All righty, we're back. I mean, yeah, I don't think there's too much for me, too much more to add on this one. This one seemed pretty obvious. Lying deteriorates the relationship with other people. Anything else from you, Caden?
No, I don't think so. Sums it up.
So then, I mean, kind of the last one is how it undermines society and how overall society functions. So I think you had a kind of a great leadway into that, how you hear somebody else lying, it kind of cues you off to thinking, oh, it's a normal activity or that's okay to do, and then kind of lowers your threshold for then doing a lie yourself.
Yeah. And to speak a little bit like professional experience, I'm in marketing, right? And that is what a lot of the time is just viewed as professional lying, right? And it has become so normalized for advertising to stretch the truth or just completely outright lie. Um, and I guess the issue in being like in a field like this is, every single competitor is doing everything they can to gain as much traffic, to get as much money as possible. And that is lying 90 to 95% of situations. So it is interesting just to see how accepted it has become. And I have seen personally stories of, speaking with CMOs, and they'll say to put messaging in there that is blatantly false, or we'll decide to put messaging in there that is just completely false. But if it gets the customer through the funnel, increases conversion rate, then it's something we keep. Um, and it sucks that that's the case, right? But it's just separating that from really your personal life. That's what I'm going to, have to do, because, at the end of the day, to be a successful marketer, stretching the truth is a part of that. But understanding that, I mean, I kind of view it almost similar to like Marcus Aurelius in Meditations. This was a person who was a Roman emperor who was a general and ordered, tens of thousands of people to get murdered, tortured even at times. Yet he was able to take his profession and kind of what he needed to do as an emperor and separate that from kind of his philosophy, um, and still kind of have this really self improvement, stoic mindset, although the things he was being asked to do or was having to do in his job maybe conflicted with that every now and then. um, so that is something that I am maybe struggling with a little bit. It's like, in marketing, I am going to have to continue to lie or stretch the truth, to be in this field. That's unfortunately how it works. So reading it, honestly, in terms of the society aspect, I was struggling with it personally, because it's like, wow, this is difficult, because I can't really say I'm never going to lie again in terms of my professional career, because that's what a lot of advertising is. Um, so I am struggling with that and kind of how I manage that. But, that's something that definitely came up when I was reading this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think one of his seemed like one of those points was when you're seeing other people lie, you kind of then at least just a general distrust in overall society. And so while it might lead to also you doing more lies, it also leads to just, yeah, distrusting entities which are important to trust, like, distrusting the pharmaceutical industry or, some of our government agencies. Um, Even if those groups aren't explicitly lying, and surely the pharmaceutical companies are explicitly lying, and possibly the government agencies too. But even if not, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. If you're seeing your friends lie, and you're seeing marketers lie, and you're seeing more local politicians lie, then it just you distrust everything, and you start to see the world through that light, and sometimes you need to trust some certain entities, and how that has made a negative impact in society. And this is how I remember the book, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because now that I'm thinking about it, it seems counterintuitive to knowing him as being so anti-religious, but I thought he had talked about how there has been a trend of more and more lying kind of as society has lost religion. And not that there wasn't any lying, obviously, during religion, but or when even just the United States was much more religious than it is now. But as we've kind of lost religion, that there's been more and more lying, and then it's built more and more distrust in some of these entities, which made the United States a strong nation at the start. And maybe we're losing some of that. Is that right? Am I remembering that correctly, or does he not mention that?
He mentions an uptick definitely in the trend of line increasing. I'm not sure if he equated it to like because of less religion, or I don't remember what he equated it to, but he definitely did say that, line, there is an uptick in it. Bringing up statistics like, I remember one thing he was talking about, like college students, when they have any interaction with each other, as decades have gone on, the likelihood that there will be a lie in that conversation has skyrocketed. So the trend is definitely upward. I'm sure he attributed it to something, and it could have been a lack of religion. I honestly don't remember though. So yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like him. I must be conflating that, or just yeah. But it is interesting.
Mhm.
I mean, anything else to add on that? I mean, before we talk about the limitations,
No, I don't think so. That kind of covers it. I just kind of want to talk, yeah, professionally. It's yeah, a struggle for sure because it's maybe spending 8 hours a day on this really cool advertising strategy and it pays off. And I've had times where it's been like, wow, Caden, great work on the messaging here. And it's like, well, this messaging is definitely stretching the truth even farther than we had before. So it's even harder when this type of lie a lot of the times can get incentivized and rewarded, right? Professionally. So it's something I am acutely aware of. That is what I want to say. And it's something I want to make sure I um, keep thinking about with any decision I make. So, yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, just I don't know anything about marketing. I can say as a consumer, if I ever find out I get lied to or the truth is stretched, I will absolutely never buy that product again. It's completely ruled out. Even if one product is lied, something is stretched, I won't even go to that store again. And, my trust is completely gone. I have a finite amount of money, and there's plenty of options to get whatever I want. I mean, we live in a world of plenty. I will happily go to the next competitor if I feel like I'm getting lied to. So yeah, I think there's definitely negatives, even if your boss is telling you you did a good job. Ultimately your boss's boss is the person that's giving them money, which is the consumer. But interesting point is that in here, I mean, he's saying never ever lie. And I can't remember if he says this in this book or if he was asked about this in a podcast that I listened to, but somebody had pushed back and was like, well, what about people harboring like
Yeah,
Jews in World War II?
exactly.
You recommend
It's
I would not lie? And he says yes. He says yes. Do not lie in that situation. You can bend the truth or you can try to not answer the question, but you should never ever lie. And so, I think that's an interesting point. I don't
yeah,
know how realistic it is. I personally am trying to live that way ever since I've read that book. I like that mindset. And yeah, I think there's ways of obfuscating the truth.
yeah.
But it is
I think a
interesting.
good
I
way of
don't think
looking
many
at
people are going to live that way.
Yeah, and I think a good way of looking at that is we are in a world, in a situation, I think we're lucky enough we can live by that kind of 0 or 1 policy. We probably will never be in a situation, where we are harboring, Polish people from Nazi Germany. So I think do I disagree with like that specific situation? Yes. I think once you have an entity that is torturing and killing people by the millions, I think you kind of, and he speaks about this a little bit. It's like um, once you start breaking like the laws of just like once you get into war type stuff, he says the rules are a little bit different, right? Like spies are going to lie when they're in war. And I think he did say like stuff like that is okay, um, from my understanding of reading the book. We just are lucky that I don't think we're ever going to have to deal with a situation like that. So we can say, 0 or 1, we're always going to tell the truth, right? Um, but I definitely disagree with that. I think if I'm protecting a family in Nazi Germany, yeah, I would lie because his explanation of, well, just like don't say the truth. Well, like, okay, that's going to be extremely sus, right? How do you go about that without blatantly lying if you have two officers at your doorstep, right? Just like, well, I refuse to tell you guys. That's basically the same thing as saying yes in a situation like that, right? Um, so that's how I
I think
view
that's
it.
a good point that, those people are never in those examples. I think that really reminds me, I had brought this book up to my dad and he was like, said that exact example. And I was like, well, have you ever been in that like situation? No, you have never been. Like, it doesn't even apply to you. So I feel like a lot of people, like, put themselves in that situation just so they can like defend lying and say
What
like,
about this?
oh yeah, like what about this? And then it's just like a
Mhm.
cop out. Like, yeah, you're never gonna likely statistically you're never going to be in that situation. And so it does make sense to just kind of live by this rule. Yeah, it's very unlikely.
Mhm. One example he gave that, while it's also statistically very unlikely, it's a little bit more likely, was like if there's a mass murderer running around the neighborhood and or he's looking for like a certain like kid that he's trying to kill, and the kid is in your backyard and he is banging on the door and you answer it and he's like, is the kid here? This guy's response would be like, well, even if he was, I wouldn't tell you. That's how Sam Harris would respond to that particular situation. Um, so again, it's these really crazy extremes that people try and find an exception to when the baseline of this book is in your everyday life. If you follow this type of creed, you're going to be much happier, and the people around you are going to respect you a lot more. These exceptions are not really worth the time to hypothetically think about because you're probably not going to be in them, right? Um, and if you are and you screw up, like, okay, your life is still 99% better because you've lived by this creed, the last 10 years of your life where you were not put in an extreme situation like this. So, um, yeah,
Yeah, that's true. Even if you do get exposed, it's still a minority of your life. All these other decisions that have benefited from it. All right, so let's wrap it up, I guess. Would you recommend this book again? Overall, what are your thoughts about it in like a one-liner? I'll go first. Yes, I definitely would recommend. Obviously, I mean, have already read this and recommended it. I've recommended it to multiple people. And one-liner, yeah, I mean, I think it's an easy read. I think it's a logical defense for it, and it's an easy framework to follow. One quick point that I don't think we mentioned is that the book is like, I don't know, 50 pages. I mean, I read it in
that's
like an hour or two, so it's super quick, super easy read. That was also a really nice thing about it. He could have gone on and on with examples and citations, but he just kept it really simple, like really high yield. I really like that about it.
100% agree. I think, yeah, a big factor for both of us on recommending a book is like the length, right? And how much time it'll take. This is such a quick read. And for what you get out of it, I 100% would recommend it. Um, the aspects I really enjoyed, I think everyone can understand the reasons to not lie and how it affects other people and relationships and society. I think most people can kind of understand those concepts. I really did like how it really is deteriorating the relationship with yourself a lot. I always, a lot of the times, thought about, well, I'm lying and it might affect my relationship with these people, but it's like self preservation, when it's really self corroding. And the way it broke that down is something I didn't really think about before. So, yes, I definitely recommend the book. Really enjoyed it. Thank you, Taylor. This was your recommendation. So, good call, man.
I'm really curious on what you scored at like 1 out of 10. I feel like we might have done that with the others. What would you say?
This I would give probably an 8. And
That's what I
it's
would do. Yeah.
I like that it was quick, but I got it in a weird way for a book to be like a 9 or a 10. It has to almost take up more time in my
Yeah,
life, if that makes sense, right?
good point.
Like for something to be a masterpiece, I can't fucking read it while I'm taking a shit, you know? So I did really like it though. Yeah, it was good.
All right, yeah, beautiful. All right, well, we'll sign off. Any parting words?
I don't think so. Thanks for watching. Great talk.
Don't lie.
Yeah, don't lie. Exactly.